Hey, Christian. How are you?
I'm good. How are you?
Good.
Let me just, there we go. Do you know if, Michelle, do you know if anyone else is joining besides John and Alex virtually?
Jim may join. He just returned back from Asia and he's not feeling well. He may have COVID. So I sent him the Zoom link and told him if you'd love to, if not, he would be the only exception because it just came up last minute. So Patty's here.
Okay.
Hey,
Hello.
I don't think you can see me. I'm hiding out on the right.
Yeah, no, I don't think I can, but I can hear you.
Okay. I may give you presenter rights so you can share the presentation tonight because once we get started, we have a few more minutes.
I feel like we haven't met in forever.
I know. Since we had a couple of meetings and here. Jim's not joining. He's sick. Okay. I didn't think he was going to join.
I don't know. That's not cool.
I hope not either. But I remember when he did have it, he was in the hospital for a week. He was really sick. Yeah, and so it's a bummer.
Won't they give him extra slowly?
Yeah, I wasn't. I got COVID in December. God hadn't gone so long with not being sick and not kind of doing all the right things to stay healthy. Got it from my physical therapist. I was so mad. So mad. She had just come back from France. She had done all the testing. And that was like kind of one thing I said when I was going back, because she'd gone away for 2 weeks. I said, are you sure you're clear? Because I will be really upset. And physical therapy went on for a few weeks, and then she called me over the weekends and I tested positive for COVID. And I'm like, okay, I'm feeling okay. She's like, you can be okay. And then about 4 days later, I'm not feeling so great. So I ended up going to the clinic and getting tested, and my husband got it. I mean, both work from home. So I did take like a couple of days. Like I checked in and emails. My boss was very positive. I was like, do we have to do it? No issue there. But,
yeah, I've had it twice.
I know people have had it more than once, and I just can't. Like, I'm the kid that used to get like bronchitis and then get seasonal allergies and all that kind of fun stuff. But
thank God. I mean, both times it really wasn't bad. The first time I didn't even know I was sick.
Did your son get it? No.
He's had it once.
He's had it once. Like I don't. It's like the new kind of flu, new bronchitis. Like instead of those, you won't hear any more about those. It'll be just COVID.
And that's fine. I mean,
it makes you feel easy. Like I had a moderate case of it. They wouldn't prescribe me anything. The GP said, you just need to just wait it out. I said, really? He's like, yeah. He goes, you need to wait it out because, I have this strong constitution. Yeah. He said, it's just sleep. He goes, just rest. He goes, just drink fluids. That's, And as soon as I told one person, and then really like, oh, how new, and all of a sudden I'm having like baskets delivered to the house. Someone brought chicken soup. Someone's magazine. Chris is like, no.
Hello, everyone.
Hey, John. How are you? Hey, John.
I'm hanging in there, Michelle. How you doing?
Great. Good to see you.
Good to see you as well.
Still waiting for a few more joiners, and then hopefully we have quorum, and then we can get started.
Sounds good.
Hopefully they know that it's here in person.
I messaged it. I didn't. Zoom link was not sent out. I messaged it several times in her email updates, and it was in person. No one had any qualms, and said the only one I couldn't meet was David here. He said, he said couldn't meet. Mark is in Europe on vacation, so I knew that. Everybody else I think is, I hope Lynn comes, because Jeff, do you know Jeff Musson? Do you know her spouse?
No.
Jeff, great guy. He fell and broke his ankle in the house. Oh no. I just feel better. That's my next book. That'll be my little activity tomorrow. I'm gonna have to go and like go to the grocery store here and pick up something or send something. Yeah. So just part of the same part of the Nahant Preservation Trust with me at this point the last few years. So he and I are like close solution architects.
That's awesome.
Yeah, Jeff to me is just a great mentor, a great thought leader, and I heard it was like, oh my God. So he just I heard he was just there, and he just like snapped. That's all it takes. Yeah. But he doesn't like to, he's another one, he's like me, doesn't want to relax. So he's an attorney, he's doing calls and what he can, it's like well, you know, the rest of the point. I mean, I understand the man. It's like I gotta do something. I know it's gonna put his foot up, and yeah, and the pain though is uncomfortable. Yeah, I mean, it's gonna be 7 months now when I broke my arm. And it is finally feeling to this day like I can actually sleep on my right side, which I couldn't do before. I know, and like physical therapy has been like the thing that has got me off the operating table with my shoulder, so trying to do it. Right, let me just check my email to see if anyone is coming. Oh, people coming. Yeah. Wait 10 minutes, then we'll see. People can get stuck in traffic. It's really nice out today. No, I know it's gorgeous out. I'm in the backyard. Hey, John. So we don't have quorum. So I don't know if I should like send a blast email out to folks or wait at least 10 minutes before I
hear noise.
I hear noise. So maybe we'll. Yay!
We should go run. I don't know.
We need one more person, then we can start.
Sir.
How are you doing?
we have come down here?
John can't.
Yeah.
So it's either Lynn, Michael. Let's see, Michael. No, not recently. So we just have just some.
You're just realizing it's not on Zoom.
That's what I was wondering.
Yeah, it's like people over like,
I checked the amended. The Zoom option.
I much prefer the in-person option. I'm just
Yeah.
zoomed out.
I think we all are, especially from work and stuff.
That is. Should work.
Yes. Yes, it does.
I was like, oh, that's
Yes.
an option.
Yes, it's awesome. Yeah, I know. They definitely improved like Wi-Fi and technology. Like it's great. A few times I've had to like come here to work or get something done and try to connect and stuff.
I remember usually setting a hotspot.
Yeah, I frequently was doing that, setting up a hotspot with my phone, and it's
The library is pretty good.
Yeah.
I work out of there.
yeah. It's like my backup plan if something happens and like the the internet goes down in town or like the house or something and this is up or the library's up, it's like, oh, I'm going. My husband can't though, because he's set up, he's got like 3 big monitors and stuff. He's a legal editor for a publishing company, and so he's working on like all these documents and stuff. I'm like, can you just like take your laptop and like go and like he's like I don't do. He's so used to now big screen monitors and stuff. He's like, no, this is my setup. We lose Wi-Fi, I'm done. That's it. I'm not struggling.
I haven't gone so far as how to work. You can get a hotspot to work.
Yeah.
That's just a bit too much. Get through.
So this is just coming back. This paternity leave.
It's great that he gets paternity leave.
Yeah. It's pretty good. Both of my firm, all the firms I've worked for, I've always had good. And I tell the teams, take it. Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Take it. Just take it. Figure it out when you need it. Don't have to take it all at once. Take it. And I've been a couple of different guys for a year and like paternity leave. I'm so happy.
It's important.
Yeah. Especially when you have like that split. You know, she's home for a while and then you can make up and take over. Email. Like,
Saw Lynn earlier and waved.
Where did you see her?
I were crying,
Oh, okay.
but not yet. No.
I was gonna say, oh, that's probably
how's Jack doing? You didn't hear what happened?
No.
He fell, broke his ankle. Like really bad, like they had to like pin and do surgery that night.
Sorry to hear that.
Yeah.
I hadn't seen it for a while. I was wondering why.
I just found out earlier this week and so I know a couple people sent them something, trying to figure out what to send them. Yeah, because you know he doesn't visit down. I know. I'm like, well,
yeah, like,
Does she ever have her office at an Alabama school?
I think so.
Okay,
Yeah, I think she's been there.
yeah,
Yeah. I checked.
it's nice to call.
Sure, go ahead.
Because I went there. Oh, yeah.
Oh, I did.
Oh, yeah, I grew up in town. Oh, yeah. Where the senior housing was the Wilson School. There was one first, second, and third, and then which is Valley Road School, go fourth and fifth, and then 6 through 8 is 9 at the Johnsons.
Oh, we
Oh, yeah.
can talk. I want to understand the history of the Johnson School and how the decision was made to migrate over to learn English and then migrate over to Swampscott.
It just really came down to ed reform and the quality of. I think they lost their accreditation at that time in the 80s. It was like 1980. I'm trying to think, because I went to parochial school when they made the split. I didn't want to go to smaller lives. In 9th grade, I went to Bishop Howard. So it was 1980, February 8. So leading up to that, they were their schools were failing. And so it was school committee in the town with the decision to separate that agreement and sponsor. That's hard. It was very hard because we always been. I was looking forward to going. So like, yeah, I had no qualms, but once that decision was made, then I felt like, I know, I just decided, we decided we weren't the only ones. About 6 immediately after that break. They all went to parochial schools or private schools. We had bus for kids that were going to Bishop Howard.
So something more.
Oh, yeah, that's how long. Okay, so I think we have quorum, so we're gonna get started.
Yeah, I think you're looking at the time.
All right. So good evening, everyone. Welcome. This is Nahant Housing Production Plan. It's an advisory committee. It is 7:10 and the chair is calling the meeting to order. Present today is Michael Raworth, Patrick O'Reilly, Michelle Capano, and Patty Harris. We're joined with our guests from NAPC, John Cruz, Christian Brandt, and Alex Bowman. So I just want a couple of things to go over tonight. So for tonight's meeting, we'll just go through the administrative stuff, but we are going to go through some material that NAPC has provided. We definitely want to talk through about goals and objectives for the housing production plan. And then we also want to take a look at you know, what the next step is in terms of options, locations, but also talk about, you know, places where we probably aren't going to be viable options. And then the last thing also is kind of like the criteria, you know, things like, you know, we want to exclude wetlands, we don't want to, you know, take away park space, open space, you know, whatever of those things make sense. And then are there other criteria to develop a plan that gives us the most, you know, the minimal viable product or options, right, that we can use, you know, to put forth. And then just lastly, a reminder, remember this is a plan, right? This is all this is a plan, a roadmap to get us to some type of end state, which is, you know, many years down the road. But this is the first step, is the plan. So I just always want to remind folks, because I know some people are like, so where are we going to put the shovels in the ground? I'm like, oh no, guys, let's roll this a little bit more. So
just to make clear, we're looking at this plan with regard to the 2 objectives, the 2 statutes, or is there something else, or are we focusing on one just now?
So tonight, focusing on the housing production plan. Later on, and John's going to speak to it, we're going to go over the revised timeline and scope, and then we're going to talk about when we're going to pivot to 3A, and then talk about what those recommendations and what that might look like as well. Okay, John, anything you want to contribute? Did I cover it all?
I think you covered it all, Michelle.
Okay, great. All right, so the chair is asking, first thing, I sent out the meeting minutes for the last 2 meetings that we had on March 2nd and March 9th. Did anyone have any feedback or updates or questions? I know our minutes are detailed, but we talk a lot and cover a lot. I want to make sure we the best product out there for folks.
No objections.
No objections, okay, so the chair is asking for a motion to approve the meeting minutes for March 2nd, 2023 and March 9th, 2023.
So it is customary in the planning board that we don't, we abstain when we weren't in attendance.
Okay, that's fine.
I believe I was not in attendance on the March 9th meeting.
Okay.
So, you know, if necessary, I think in the past when reviewing, going back in time when not all members were present to reconstruct minutes, we've certainly, as needed, voted to approve.
Okay. Should we hold off until we have, you know, fully full complement to, because we
There's
don't.
no harm in doing that.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right, so let's do this. Let's hold off approving meeting minutes until we have a full board, because we lose one person or we have one more.
Or in case we have a quorum of those who were present.
Yes.
This being approved.
Yep.
We could vote to approve Mark.
I wasn't here.
Oh, you were. Okay.
It's fine. That's fine, we can cover them again in a future meeting, so it's not a problem. Okay, so then the next thing is, and I'm gonna give either Christian or John presenter rights to go through. We're gonna cover their materials and talk through their recap and their analysis from the first community engagement. So give me 1 second.
I'll be sharing my screen, Michelle, so if you could give me the
Yep.
presenter rights, that'd be great.
So I don't have my distance glasses on, so I apologize. Trying to find a sheet.
Well.
Mine has gone spot. I have 3 different sets of glasses.
Oh. So if you see us squinting, that's just our bad eyesight.
Wait, I don't want to change the okay. Yeah. So, I don't know if either of you know Zoom very well. Do you know where I would find to share?
Is it under
Oh, here we go.
Make host.
Host. Okay, got it. There we go. Sorry.
All right, are you able to see the first slide? Okay, great. Off to you, John.
All right. Thank you so much, Christian, and thank you, Michelle, and everybody else who's here joining us tonight. So the purpose of tonight's meeting is we really want to establish the goals and begin a conversation about the opportunity areas for development. We've drafted some goals for your consideration, but what we really need is to establish the big overarching goals for the housing plan at tonight's meeting so that we can do our work to get the recommendations drafted based on those goals. So it's really critical that we come up with some consensus tonight, and we need to begin a discussion on the opportunity areas so that we can analyze them and set us up really well for the 3A conversation we're going to be having shortly. We got a lot to cover, so we're going to try really hard as much as possible to stick to all of these. I know it's a gorgeous evening and everybody would rather be sitting outside on the deck watching the sunset than being here. So thank you all so much for taking the time to do so. Christian's going to go ahead and get us started with a recap of the forum.
Yes, thank you, John. So I believe everyone who's joined us in the room was at the forum, so I am looking forward to hearing how you thought it went. But we just wanted to share a few high-level notes about it. So we had approximately 36 people in attendance at Town Hall. Generally, I would say the forum attendees tended to be more senior in terms of age, which reflects kind of the general demographics of Nahant. We know that Nahant is in general an older community, and so that's sort of not surprising. The event broadcast / recording has been viewed 141 times. And most of the participants came from Big Nahant. My recollection is that only one person put a pin in Little Nahant on the map. And I know not everyone filled out or put a pin in the map, so potentially there were more people from Little Nahant, but that is just something to note for future events in terms of outreach. So we have a few key takeaways from the input that we got from the forum, but definitely the one that rose to the top in terms of frequency was meeting the needs of Nahant's aging population. So the feedback came in a variety of forms with regard to this. Some people said, you can see some of the sticky notes from the boards on the presentation, and I know I don't know how easy it is for you to read, so I'll just read some of them. One sticky note says small houses for the elderly. Another one says need more elderly housing. And then another one says seniors, and then in parentheses, small bungalow type buildings so that seniors can remain in Nahant. And we got a bunch of comments along these lines. So definitely, specifically a desire for smaller housing types that might facilitate aging in place. There was definitely also some interest in multifamily housing that's suitable for seniors, assisted living options, and then kind of generally a concern about longtime Nahanters facing housing instability as they continue to age in the community. In terms of other main takeaways, we heard a lot from folks about interest in different types of housing. So you can see one of the boards that we had. I don't know, I don't think you can see because maybe it's too small, but there is a sticky note on that board that says it's all good, which we love to see. But you can see that the dots are sort of distributed across almost all of the different options that we included on this board. So there's a strong desire, especially for accessory apartments. And you can see that reflected on the board itself. That section of the board has the most dots on it. It definitely also came up in some of the sticky note feedback that we received as well. And then
we need to be on the same page about what is meant by mixed use development in the context of Nahant.
Yes, I think that is certainly something to continue to refine, like as we move on forward in this process. So that certainly can be something that we discuss as a committee, and I'll leave that to John.
Back up and I don't recall what was stated on the board, but you guys have got access to it. What was it? What could people read on the board where they had their opportunity to put stickers?
Yeah.
On the block that said something about about mixed use. What did
so
that
the text under mixed use says mixed use buildings may vary in size. The ground floor is reserved for commercial activity and all the other floors for residential homes. So that was the description that they were responding to.
Okay.
So I think I understand the desire for that because we have limited businesses in town. And I think if we expand with options, right, for different types of housing, are those housings going to have a full washer and dryer? So we used to years ago have a laundromat. We don't have a laundromat in town. So, you know, if there is somewhere that a neighborhood changes that, you know, there are apartments on the top and the bottom floors have other, you know, conveniences, coffee shop, laundromat, that's great. We need that.
So we do have mixed use in town.
Right.
So it's just not really zoned for it.
Exactly.
So I think that's one of the things that we need to look at.
That's what I was going to say. I mean, to other than the areas that are currently, you know, like the quote downtown, I think some zoning amendments would be called for, and it may need to create a new category of zoning
or overlay. Right?
Or
Yeah, and I think Mike, that's you who asked this question, right?
Yes.
Okay, I can tell from your voice. I can't tell because I can't see you. But I think what we noticed is that people were interested in that based on not just the dots, I mean, certainly people added dots to the mixed use square on this poster, but it also came up on some of the sticky notes and at least in one conversation that I had. So I'm going to keep us going. We also heard some feedback about housing options that might support young families. So particularly lack of homes that are starter home sized. And then, I think this probably isn't a surprise, but some feedback about existing housing options being unaffordable or too large for young families. I'll just read the sticky note in case it's hard for you to read, but it says housing developed so that people who have lived here their whole lives won't have to leave Nahant. Certainly a desire to make sure that people who grew up in Nahant can raise their families here and sort of stay, keep Nahant to be the generational community that it has been for a long time. So, and then the fourth main takeaway was came a lot from people's statements about what they want Nahant's future to be like, and we really saw a lot of comments about Nahant's future being family friendly, welcoming, and inclusive. So from left to right, the sticky notes say a welcoming, inclusive, and diverse community. The middle one says diversity, age, and race. And then the last one says neighborly, a supply of housing affordable and appropriate to all ages, family sizes, income levels, and ethnicities. So really a strong desire to make sure that housing is part of that, of Nahant being a welcoming community to people from all walks of life.
I fully endorse this, but I've been operating on the assumption that sooner or later, we're going to get a pushback from people who are contrary to that idea. Now, maybe I'm being too cautious, but I'm afraid of that because of the tendency of some people to be, hostile to people from across the causeway.
Mike, that's a really great segue into this slide, which is really an opportunity for us to hear, because I know that all of you were at the meeting, having your own conversations with folks. And so we're curious, what did you hear from people what in the conversations that you were having? And do you think there are any themes or takeaways that are missing? And so, for instance, Mike, if you heard, fears from folks along the lines that you were just saying, it would be really interesting to hear more about what that conversation was like. Or any other conversations you think that you had of note that you want to share?
I didn't hear any of that night.
Yeah,
and that was good. I was very encouraged by that.
Yeah,
but that number one, this is a pretty small slice of the population, and number two, I think that the attendance was self-selected. In other words, people who were minded to be favorable to what we're doing were the ones who were likely to show up. So once again, I may be being way overcautious, and I freely admit that, but I think we want to be careful about reading too much into what we got out of this first set.
Yeah, I think we did a good job at promoting it and publicizing it. It was communicated an item, we got it on social, we put some flyers out, people knew about it. So, people who would say I didn't know about it really be upset by that comment. I think
I'm sorry, what comment?
be upset if they didn't know that we were having a housing event, right?
Oh.
I think in addition, I asked the committee to reach out to your own network of neighbors and friends and whoever, and just send a warm email to invite them. I know I did, and a few people showed up, I think to support me and to support what we're doing. The people I talk to are tremendously supportive on we need to do something.
Yeah.
Housing is for them, these people, it was all about senior housing, right? And having more senior housing options for them. I like the comment that was someone made earlier about assisted living. Didn't think about that one, but that would be really good if there was an option like that for seniors here. And I immensely support the diversity and inclusiveness as well, because unfortunately this community is very lacking for whatever reason it is, and it obviously the real estate market prices people out. So nothing we can do about that. People that own their property want to get money for it, and if it's someone of a different race, ethnicity who can afford that, great. But we lack that diversity piece.
Right. Let me clarify something, Christian. In terms of the units that count toward our tally. Well, I guess we're not worried about the tally of units anymore. We're worried about geography.
Yeah.
But my concern is that while I very much favor the idea of assisted living and elderly housing, housing that's designated for that, if it can be, I'm just curious about whether there's any, whether our designation of 1.5% of the real estate is, if there's any complication with having it set aside for purposes such as elderly housing or those who have a history of housing in Nahant, because we want to make sure that what we do truly qualifies and doesn't trip over its shoelaces.
I think, I think John can speak more directly to that specific question. I guess one thing I just want to sort of emphasize is that some of the, the feedback that we heard specifically about housing for Nahant's aging population, it wasn't necessarily framed specifically as like, age restricted senior housing, like capital S, capital H, age restricted senior housing. And there certainly are lots of opportunities to think about housing that is suitable for seniors, but which is not necessarily restricted to seniors. Do you know what I mean?
Yes.
And I think John can speak a little bit more to the sort of technicalities of or Alex, the housing team can speak a little bit more to that. But I think in terms of the housing production plan, certainly senior housing comes up a lot in the work that we do. I think there's an interest, I would say based on the feedback that there is an interest in having housing that is suitable for folks who are wanting to age in place, but not restricted necessarily to folks who want to age in place. That, restriction is certainly a strategy, but, developing housing that is suitable for folks who want to age in place, but other people can also live in is
housing authority.
The housing authority on Nahant Road is one of those properties that is not dedicated for just elderly. It's dedicated, there's elderly and there are people who have other like mobility issues or something like that.
Yeah. And I'll say I think that's this is a really great conversation when we start thinking about the goals, which we're going to get into in the later part of this. So if it's okay with you, Mike, I would love to put a pin on that so we can come back to it. And I'm just wondering, are there takeaways that you had from the forum that you didn't, that aren't included under those 4 takeaways that I just shared?
So just to recap, so the takeaways were elderly housing.
Yep.
Housing for families.
Yeah. So elderly housing for Nahant's aging population, an interest in different types of housing, like a mix of housing types to consider, housing options that might support young families, which, that could be the same type of housing that might support seniors who want to downsize. And then having housing be part of the way in which Nahant becomes more welcoming and inclusive. Those are the 4, excuse me.
No, I think just trying to think back to the event. I mean, these were all the same things in terms of like when I talk to people, and I talk to a lot of people, I heard the same things. So yeah.
I will move on to the next slide. And we wanted to talk a little bit, we've talked to some of you about this already, I think, about the forum promotion. Certainly, I know, I think we should talk about what went well. We usually call this like a plus delta. So like the plus is what went well, the delta is what you would change. So what went well, what could we improve for next time? I also would love to know a little bit more about, and you started talking about this already, Michelle, a little bit more about like what avenues you used and which ones you think worked the best so that we can sort of capitalize on those next time.
Signboard.
Yeah,
The electronic signboard, that was a seasonal issue and a weather issue,
right.
but that's, you know, we're past that now. So that, I mean, that is something that, you know, is probably the most reliable way to get things out to people. Now, I don't know if it was because I signed up for something or whether it's been changed, but I got a email alert about the town election. And it seems to me that if we don't have it already, now would be a good time to encourage people to input their email address to something that the town has for notifications about sewer line breaks, you know, major events and things like this.
Yeah, so that's interesting that you said that, because I know we have the reverse 911 when there are emergencies, but the email, I didn't get the email. How did you sign up for that?
How did I? Well, I'm not sure that I formally signed up for something. I was tugging Diane Dunphy's sleeve because I went on a website to basically get a fix on the date for the election and the date for town meeting.
Oh, okay.
And it was flaming difficult to find. I mean, it should be in big flashing letters on the homepage of the website. You know,
the town clerk's page.
I'm sorry.
It's the town clerk's page, but you're right. There should be. There is a, if I remember correctly, something for like hot topics or key topics or something. But some of the navigation is quirky. I totally agree.
Yeah, and I mean that these are the biggest events in the town's calendar, so you shouldn't have to. It shouldn't have to take much. Anyway, she may have been responding with an abundance of caution and putting my email on the alert list for the announcement of the election.
Yeah.
Yeah, we'll definitely have to investigate that.
But I mean, separate apart from what I just went through with Diane, she was very good about it. But it seems to me that we've got this telephone alert system, which is good, but in some respects, you know, when it's about the trash day being changed, it's not something that you need to get a cell phone call about. You know, it would be sufficient to get an email notification.
Well, I know we do text too.
I'm sorry.
They do text messaging too.
Fair enough.
Yeah.
But I mean, not everybody's into text messaging, and you know, I think email is sort of the default mechanism now, even for older people. And
yeah, I mean, I think that sounds like a great suggestion, Mike, to have this shared out in the town's newsletter. I'm assuming that the town, you know, a lot of municipal websites in Massachusetts are set up through the same company, and they kind of have this functionality to them where the website itself comes with like a newsletter that you can subscribe to. Sometimes use it, sometimes don't. So I'm guessing that's probably what you were talking about, if I'm interpreting what you said correctly.
I'm not familiar with the kind of vendors that you're talking about. It sounds like, you know, great minds think alike.
And it sounded like also the getting this up on the sign, the electronic signboard would be a really good thing too.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, it would be great if everybody visited the town website every day to get the updates, but nobody's going to do that. And you know, it's I just described a little bit of impenetrability about it.
Yeah. In terms of like outreach efforts that you all might be doing, are there any sort of materials that you would find really helpful beyond like a flyer, which we can certainly do again, because it sounds like that you utilize the flyer in doing outreach. So we can make another flyer for the next forum, but are there other things that would be helpful?
Yeah, so I do a lot of social and digital media, and you know, that kind of dovetails in like a little side gig here. But do you have like ready-made digital content that we can push off of the MAPC/Nahant Housing Production Committee that we can push through social, through Facebook, because we have a hugely active Facebook audience in this town.
Yeah,
and
yeah.
Something I can promote on the pages, like, you know, here's an update, you know, here's like, if you like, say you created an image that says, you know, here's, you know, we had a successful first engagement meeting, click here to read about all the recap and, you know, takeaways, that kind of stuff. I can definitely push it out on social.
That's a great suggestion. I think, would you, I guess, Michelle, would you be looking for, like, is what you're asking about if MAPC can post about the Nahant Housing Production Plan meeting on our Facebook and then you can share it? Or are you looking for like—
Yeah, you have a Facebook page and then I go there and share it. I can do that.
I will have to check with our communications team before I commit them to doing stuff.
Yeah, it's okay.
Can you share it directly, like the event, like the detail from the word?
I can screen grab it and create something.
It's not just
I think generally the communications team's preference is, or the way in which that I know we have done this in the past, is that we've generated like social media friendly content that is like, you know, like a social media card, for instance, that views really well, like a JPEG, basically of like a JPEG version of the flyer that views really well on social media, and then content that can be shared, and then you can post that yourself. I'm not entirely sure how our comms team would feel about us posting, like creating a post specific to this event, because we do have, I mean, the social media page has a regional reach, so that might be expanding the event beyond where you might want it to. But
so I think it depends on what we're talking about. Like, if we're talking like, you know, on the next event, we can put it on the community calendar, we can share it, and then I can nudge town hall to put it on their Facebook page, and then we can on the other community Facebook pages. But what I was speaking to was, is it possible to develop content that like specifically like recaps the event? We can still put it on the town's Facebook page and then get it to share. I'm fine with you not, like, I get what you're saying about posting, but can you create the content? We'll get it posted and shared.
That is definitely something that we can do.
Okay. Yeah.
And amongst the content, I would suggest the 4 or 5 desired states that we talked about before.
Yeah.
I think that's good to circulate, to basically get it into people's brain space so that they begin to think about it. Number one, it may spawn additional ideas that we ought to consider. But number two, I think the longer that, for example, the idea of creating space for the elderly is in circulation in the minds of the town, the less likely it is that we're likely to have a troglodyte backlash of the kind that I was worried about before. It just makes sense to get it into the bloodstream of people so that, number one, when it comes time to vote or decide about these things, there's a much greater turnout of people who favor these values than, you know, who are just negative, you know, naysayers.
Mike, were you talking about those 4 main takeaways that we talked about earlier?
Yes.
Okay, got it. Okay, great. I'm happy to, I'll connect with John and our communications team offline and touch base with them to see, and I'll follow up with you, Michelle and Tony, and obviously John and Alex about the social afterwards. But I think I want to keep us going on to the next section, if that is okay with all of you.
This one though, can I just ask this one question? So in terms of what, in terms of like, what can we do for the next time? So I don't know if you guys do this or not, but have you done like postmortems where you did like a flash survey out to people who attended by email and say, thank you for attending, here's some key takeaways. And then we'd appreciate your feedback. Would you mind completing this 3-minute survey with like 6 questions on it?
We have done that in the past. Certainly I would not say that it typically results in a very high rate of return. But we can certainly consider that. I mean, I think one thing that I'm looking into at, you know, John and Tony's request is a digital component for the next forum that
Yes.
would enable people to participate in, you know, the process in a very similar way, even if they can't come to the event.
Yeah, no, I'm definitely supportive if we have to do a large like Zoom town hall for the next one that's really scripted well, and you know, John and I co-facilitate or whatever, how we do that. But yeah, I definitely vision the next one to be that.
How's it going?
So, hey Tony.
Hey, Tony.
How you guys doing?
Good.
Good, join us. No.
Big comp meeting, I was able to step away. I told Nelson, text me if I'm needed. So now I'm here with you.
Okay, so we're just going through kind of just debriefing from the forum, just touching on this last slide on, you know, what went well, our outreach efforts, and you know, things we want to do for the next time, the digital component. So I just said that I think I envision this next community engagement to be like a Zoom town hall to really get people to come, hopefully, you know, 200 people if we can support it. And you know, do something creative in terms of like breakout rooms and that kind of stuff. I touched on that because I've sat on some for the state for the Trails Project, and so they had some, and for MBTA 3A, and we had some really big community, you know, big number of communities, citizens calling in, participating, and they did a nice job at creating breakout space and facilitators who helped dive into some of the questions and concerns.
Cool.
But Christian, going on to your next question, what can we improve upon for next time? I think it's more circulation. And I know that we think that everybody's willing.
Yeah.
But I'm not sure that that's necessarily true. So I'm wondering, how can we reach a larger audience?
You mean noticing the meeting ahead of time?
Yeah.
Even
Knowing we exist.
People know
Yeah,
we exist. Sure.
How do I make you
So
It comes up, the housing product, you know, your committee and this topic comes up a lot in, you know, everyday conversations that I have with people. But getting them to attend the meeting, you know, I think Christian, you had brought it up that, you know, having like a month to tease it out there.
Yeah.
Would be ideal versus I think we only have a couple weeks.
Yeah.
What?
Yeah.
What about asynchronous feedback? Like just an email inbox, you know, just some.
That's a good idea.
Promoting.
Yeah.
Either after the fact, so people will try to show up. Rather than just email us, because we do want people to show up, but putting it out there, just.
I mean, publicity for a specific event, that's good. That's one thing. I think there's another topic, and that is more general awareness of what we're up to and what we're doing. And that was the reason that I suggested that we publicize those 4 themes that came out of last time, so as to get it into people's gearbox, you know, so that they begin to think about it and chew on it, and people don't feel like they've been taken by surprise by this stuff. It gets to be in the general public discussion, because I think this stuff, I think this prospers the more people attend to it and think about it and talk about it with each other.
Yeah.
Agreed. I'm wondering, is that publication for town meeting still being mailed to all of the residents? And could we put something in that book if it's not too late? I don't know if it's gone to press.
It goes tomorrow.
Oh, okay.
So you're saying it's not too late?
Sneak in a handwritten note.
That book to educate.
Well,
We could do a presentation at town meeting, a brief, you know, informational.
It's I don't know if I would do a presentation, but you certainly could hand out.
we could prepare something.
You could hand something out at town meeting that says, because by then the town meeting is May 20th, and this meeting is gonna be June what, 4th?
Yeah.
14 or? I forget what it is.
Yeah, I mean, certainly, I think that's a great idea, Tony. We can make sure we can work to have a flyer. Well, I guess can you remind me when the town meeting is?
Not yet.
May 20th.
Okay. Well, we can, I mean, if we're working on like a social thing, what along the lines of what Michelle was mentioning earlier, I'll connect with John offline and see what we might be able to get ready by the 20th. Certainly, I think we probably would want to just stick to this is happening, here's the website, this is a summary of what's happened so far type of thing, and not necessarily like more of a sort of one-way like update and get involved type of flyer.
Yeah, and probably by then we should have the date nailed down for the June meeting, and you could put that right on the notice saying,
yeah,
next public engagement meeting is June, whatever, here in the town.
Yeah, so John and I will connect about this and make sure that it fits in the timeline, but I think that's a great idea. If we can get something in the hands of people at town meeting, I'm sure that will be helpful for generating.
It's also common to that groups will have like a table out on the front lawn, so you could do something like that. As long as you're not discussing, like as long as you're not pushing a topic that's featured on the warrant, you can be on the front lawn.
Yeah, there's not.
There's not.
So
as long as you're not saying, as long as you're not talking about like short-term rentals while you're there.
Great. So I'm going to keep us moving if that's okay with everybody. This was a really helpful conversation, and we'll come up with a strategy and share it back with, at least with Michelle and Tony, for town meeting. I have some ideas percolating for us. So I will go on to the next slide for the HPP goals conversation.
Thank you so much, Christian.
Yeah.
Now we're gonna go ahead and review some draft goals for the HPP that are being proposed tonight for everyone's consideration. Again, this is just a draft. We're going to try to decide on this and get through all of it, and this is going to allow us to move forward with recommending about putting together some recommendations. Moving on to the next slide here, we heard the key takeaways that we just went over, that Christian went through. Just to recap those again really quickly so that we're in the right frame of mind here. We're talking about addressing the aging population. We're talking about creating greater housing choice so there's more options in Nahant for people to choose from. Do what we can to lower high housing costs, and seeing what we can do to advance equity and expand housing programs to make Nahant a more equitable community, particularly for creating opportunities for people of color. So with all of this stuff in mind, moving on to the next slide, the other big public forum takeaways: meeting the needs of Nahant's aging population is a high priority. We really need to support a lot of stuff. We really need to be doing lots of things that are consistent, that make the whole place feel very welcoming and inclusive to people that are not just residents, but those who want to be residents, next generation residents, things like that. And these are all very consistent with the forum, the housing needs assessment. There's a lot of synergy between all these different things that we talk through. And so when we have this process of how we put all this stuff together, and looking at the next slide, we have this structure where we have goals at the top, and then within each goal, there's going to be some different recommendations and then actions to support it. So as an example, we have this here, and the goal in this example is to expand what we're calling little to middle housing options. So that's a very big overarching goal that's designed to cover a lot of potential things. And within that, we have an example of, if we want to expand these little to middle housing options, we could draft an ADU bylaw or an accessory apartment bylaw. And then the actions that would go along with that recommendation are deciding on areas of the town for ADU zoning to apply, or reviewing existing ADU bylaws from similar communities and seeing what other people have done and what the trends look like and things like that. So before I move on, does anybody have any questions about how this is set up? Or are we okay?
No, John, it's Michelle. Can you go back a couple of slides?
Christian, the housing needs takeaways.
So attainable market rate housing, the only challenge I have with that is market rate is increasing, you know, what's market rate, you know, in December is going to be not the same as market rate in May. I'm concerned that the people who get focused on the cost of buying, because right now I think we've heard that it's about $900,000, you know, to buy a house in that. That's crazy. I just don't know what that market rate looks like. But if we're just focusing on the affordable housing side, then market rate could be $650, but that's still high.
It
so
is.
How are we quantifying that in a way that someone that's looking to buy into affordable housing, right, that it meets these needs, can do it? I know we can take it away, but that's not something that really sticks out for me.
Yeah, and I think that's a really fair thing to say. And something I want to point out here on this slide is where we see affordable housing, those are capital letters. So at that point, we're talking about the deed restricted affordable housing. We want to be able to do lots of things to increase the supply, to be able to have more market rate housing, more potentially lowercase a affordable housing, if that's even possible. But the goal here is really just to increase the amount of housing options that are available, and hopefully through supply and demand see things lowered. I know there's a tremendous amount of challenges there, and I don't want to get lost too much in the weeds for tonight, because we could very easily be here until midnight talking about things at that level of detail. I just want to make sure that the point that we're getting across here is that there's a need for deed restricted housing, there's a need for affordable housing, there's a need for market rate housing, there's a need for naturally occurring market rate affordable housing. Like every single need we could check off potentially is really what we're looking at here. So this is designed to cover a lot of those things. Alex, do you have anything that you'd like to add to that?
I think that's well said, John. I just want to make it clear that these are the takeaways from the housing needs assessment, and then the slide after is the takeaways from the forum, and actually they're quite similar, which I think is a good thing to see, that our analysis and also what we heard from the public is pretty much on par with each other in terms of, you know, specifically market rate housing. I think it's a great point, Michelle, that market rate housing costs can change at any time. And that's why we also need to be looking at affordable housing that's always going to be affordable, but that we want to think about kind of a holistic approach. And I think the wording can be changed, but I think the intention here was to say that, you know, we need to have more housing options so that there's some more homes that are going to be more affordable or attainable to folks in the market, because, you know, even though we can build affordable housing, it's very challenging to do. We also need to create other housing options. So for instance, a large single family home that I think the median price was somewhere around $950,000 in Nahant is going to be much less attainable than a condo that could be around 375, 400 or whatever it is. So just thinking about creating all the different things that we can, taking a holistic approach to the problem. And we can also, when we get to the point of recommendations, think about strategies and policies to reduce costs of housing that's in the marketplace as well.
Thank you.
So we're going to go ahead and advance these forward a little bit, and we're going to go ahead and go one more and start talking about the goals that we've got laid out here. So you can see we have 5 of them. Again, these are the draft goals for consideration, and the 5 that we've gone ahead and put down based on all the feedback and HNA data and forum stuff and conversations with you all and Tony and everybody else. Number 1, expand the little to middle housing options. So there's this missing middle housing, smaller sizes, a little bit less of a financial strain on folks. Number two, producing the deed restricted capital A affordable housing that will remain affordable for years and years and years to come, no matter what the market does. Number three, reducing housing instability for seniors and vulnerable households, so creating options for them, allowing them to be able to stay in the community. Number four, supporting the first-time homeownership, allowing for multi-generational Nahant residents to be able to have options to buy there and be able to harmonize housing needs with the sustainability goals. Now, we haven't had a tremendous amount about a conversation about sustainability throughout this process. However, Nahant's a coastal community. There's a lot of really, really beautiful public land, a lot of really beautiful sites, and there's the ever-looming threat of climate change that we need to be aware of when we do development in a place like this. So we want to make sure that all the things that you guys really love and care about the community, we're doing a lot to kind of keep and preserve all of that and keep it harmonious with the natural environment as much as possible as well. So with that in mind, we want to hear what you guys think about these. Did we get them right? Are there things that we should be including that we did not? Are there things that we should be omitting that we have here? And as we start this conversation, again, I want to remind you all that these are big overarching things that recommendations and actions will fall under once we get a little bit more granular and start flushing those out. So we'll have some recommendations for you all to consider very, very soon, but we want to make sure that the goals are set and straight first. So with that in mind, I'm going to turn it over to you all, and I'm looking forward to hearing your thoughts.
What's meant by housing instability for seniors?
I'm sorry, what was that?
What is meant by housing instability for seniors?
So this is designed to make sure that there's nobody who is worried about being able to stay where they are. So this could be things related to people that want to downsize and stay in the community, people that want to be able to stay in their homes but find a way to afford it with rising utility costs and not have to go through something like a reverse mortgage, or just other ways of making sure people don't feel as though their housing is at risk.
Yeah, apart from develop downsize options, what is it that what are measures that you all have had experience with in other communities that would serve goal number 3, putting aside downsizing housing stock?
So I think in terms of like downsizing options, I think that would be more so captured in goal 1, the little to middle housing options like you would have.
Right. Just saying, setting that to one side.
But yeah, to goal 3, first I just wanted to add that our data does show that most households that are having trouble affording housing in town are led by a senior, a lot of seniors living alone. So this was something that was really identified in the housing needs assessment, and something that I think was also supported from the feedback that we got from a lot of folks from the senior community that attended the forum. In terms of, what would recommendations for that goal look like? It could be connecting seniors to programs from the state, or even possibly creating local programs to help with things like home modifications. A lot of the housing stock in Nahant is older, as well as the community that is aging may need to make some adjustments to their home and be able to stay there as they age, as they may experience physical limitations. A lot of senior households may be transitioning to a fixed income or retired. So there may be some other programs and policies to think about in terms of helping seniors pay for utility costs, or helping seniors weatherize their homes to lower those utility costs. So it could be programs, it could be policies, it could be funding, it could be coordination with the Council on Aging to really understand the best way to support seniors. So that's how that would look. And then there are also other households that we know from the data that are also struggling to afford housing in Nahant, and there could be some other programs to consider to assist those households as well. A lot of things are available at the state level where we could look at better promoting those things, and there are local policies that we might be thinking about to supplement some of those things. But I think a lot of it has to do with policies and recommendations that would help seniors stay in their existing home and be able to afford housing, or to lower any kind of housing cost burdens that they may be having.
There's two groups, I think, that you could add to this list to speak to more people and that's like workforce. So, you know,
Housing for the local workforce.
you know, well, it's like, it's people who are, you know, like the blue collar type job force folks, there's still a lot of that in Nahant. And they feel, I think, I get a sense that they feel like they're almost kind of being
Squeezed out.
And then recently, you know, veteran housing has popped up in some conversations that I've had too, so. There are a lot of veterans in Nahant, but I don't know if you want to add to this list, but those are just two different types of groups that you could speak to as well.
Well, providing let's say the middle housing options is a partial solution to those goals. I am not clear to what extent we're able to expand what Michelle commented on before in terms of the limited availability of certain units to certain populations, like to seniors and so forth, veterans. I think it would be difficult to limit availability to people in the local blue collar workforce, as desirable as that may be. I'm not aware of any way that you could legally do that. But I'm not even. Go ahead.
I have a thought about that. So, you know, the workforce, and, you know, I understand that, yeah, there are a lot of working folks in Nahant that aren't, you know, necessarily wealthy, but also not necessarily very low income either. And a lot of those folks kind of are caught in the middle where they're not getting the support of programs because they're not having a low enough income to do that. But they're also still struggling with housing because the cost of housing in Nahant and Greater Boston is so expensive. So you can look at affordable housing that is actually income restricted for people who may be in that workforce's income range. You know, so you could have affordable housing if we kind of think back at some of the charts we looked at before, where like 80% of the area median income is kind of the standard affordable housing in terms of like who's eligible for that. So that could be like an individual making like $70,000. And then there's extremely low income affordable housing where the only folks who are eligible for that are, you know, maybe an individual making like $35,000. You could bump that up to 100% AMI, 120% AMI if you want to target some of those workforce folks. So you could do that, or you could also target some of those programs under goal 3. Like if you were going to have a program to help families reduce their utility expenses, and, you know, there's income eligibility for that. You could have a range where we want to, you know, distribute this funding to folks who are, you know, in the lower income ranges. We also want to hold a portion of that to distribute to those who may be in that middle income and above income range that's often missed in government programs. So there's definitely ways to do that. And if we feel like, you know, that's an important group to be thinking about here, you know, we can also include that group in terms of the goals. But I think, you know, a lot of this probably does boil down into how we structure the recommendations, but having this information, understanding that's a priority is good to know.
Other thoughts?
No, I mean, these are all themes we've been talking about pretty consistently, so you know, there's nothing here that, at least in my mind, is something we haven't talked about before.
Yeah, I didn't think there was a whole lot new here. Maybe some of the sustainability stuff, like I said, hasn't been a big part of the conversation, but everything else we really felt was in line with all the conversations that we've had previously. So I'm glad to hear that it sounds like we need to work out some of the details, and I think some of that stuff will come into focus once we're able to get you all some actual real recommendations to look into, and then we can start, you know, the devil's in the details, so they say, and that's the kind of place where they're going to lie. So we need to be very very communicative about, using shared language and making sure that we're all talking about things the same way. But it sounds like for right now, we're feeling really, really good about this. So if that's where we're at, we're going to go ahead and put some things together for y'all to take a look at.
Okay, so I will say this because Jim's not here, but he would be pleased to see the sustainability goals because he has talked about that very early on when we first started forming.
He did, and I'm sure he'll be taking the time to watch this video later on, and we're looking forward to hearing his thoughts at some point.
No.
He mentioned in an email earlier that he was looking forward to seeing the video, so that's all I'm referring to.
Okay.
All right, we're going to go ahead and move on to the housing opportunity area discussion, which is on the next slide here. So moving forward, we got a few different things that we are going to talk about before we actually get into the selection itself. So
John, do you think that I could frame this one up? Just because I've had some discussions with both Tony and Michelle about it, just to make sure that we can facilitate the best discussion possible. Thanks. So I just want to make sure everyone understands, before we get into like this site, that site, which can be, sort of a sensitive conversation at times, that, as Michelle said at the beginning of this meeting, this is a plan, it's a roadmap. Anything that happens on a site or a location in town eventually that may be identified as a potential opportunity in this plan, a lot of other things would have to happen for anything to actually be developed or built or happen at that site. But for a housing production plan, which is a statute from the state, that housing production plan must identify certain areas where the town thinks are opportunities for housing development and places where they would like to encourage affordable housing development. So what we're trying to do is identify where these opportunities are. And tonight is the first of several conversations about which opportunities we want to include in the plan. So we're kind of having that first conversation tonight. But just to be clear, any site that's identified in this plan, if it's privately owned, what happens on that site is going to be up to the private property owner. Private property owner may do what they wish with it. But it may be, if it's identified as an opportunity, something where the town might have conversations with that private property owner, see, maybe they would like to do something with that and could partner with that private property owner to see a development that would benefit the town and would be in alignment with the goals of this housing plan. This might be something where the town sees an opportunity to possibly purchase a site. This might be something where there's a publicly owned site that's already owned by the town, where the town might think about partnering with a developer to do something. But again, all of those things are going to require a lot more public process. Some of them, are going to require possible town meeting votes. Some of that may require permitting through different boards. So again, we're at a really high level, and what we're trying to do is just identify opportunities. Before we identify opportunities, I think it's really important to state what we're not looking at, like what is not an opportunity. We're not looking at developing parks. We're not looking at developing or identifying opportunities in protected open space, in areas that are severely constrained environmentally or would be, at an obvious threat of sea level rise, those sorts of things. So rest assured, we're not going to propose to redevelop a playground or a school or a park or protected open space. But really, the town administration understands, from working day to day, where some possible opportunities are. So what we want to do is have a discussion about some of those opportunities tonight. We have a way to kind of think about these opportunities in terms of feasibility, in terms of, how likely we are to potentially realize an opportunity in this area. And then in terms of impact, in terms of maybe how much of an impact that development opportunity could have in terms of increasing the stock of affordable housing, or maybe creating some gathering space through mixed use or something like that. So that would be kind of like impact and then feasibility. And so we'll have that conversation tonight. It's a preliminary conversation. It also will gear us up to start thinking about potential locations where we would want to have 3A zoning as we start to work into that planning process as well. So if, Christian, you could just advance the slide. I'll give you a little more information on 3A. So you'll see in the timeline that we're going to go over later that we're just starting to really get into 3A from the technical side that MAPC is starting to focus on, and we'll start having meetings that are more focused on 3A as we progress. But when we're talking about potential development opportunities, I think we also want to have in mind that we are going to be working towards thinking about where a 3A compliant zoning district may make sense in Nahant. So I just want to make you aware of what by state statute a 3A compliant district would be for Nahant. So the state has classified all the different communities differently based on, you know, what their level of access is to public transit, based on population and housing size. And so Nahant, rightfully so, is classified as one of the lowest thresholds for requirements as an adjacent small town. So while other communities in the state are classified differently, and you know, many of them have to develop 1,200 or more, or not develop, but zone to allow for 1,200 or more multifamily housing units. Some of them have to locate the zone in a very specific location because of their proximity to a commuter rail station. And others have to have, you know, a minimum size of the district. Since Nahant is an adjacent small town, the state has set different standards. And so basically this is what a 3A compliant district would look like in Nahant. So Nahant can basically locate a 3A district wherever we decide. So that's not like we have to look in certain places in town. We can decide where it makes the most sense together, and based on this planning process and public input. The town could decide to have one 3A district, or it could have multiple, as long as together varying levels of density allow for 15 units per net acre. Nahant has to have 3A districts or a district that allows for a total of 84 multifamily housing units. Again, that's not the town saying like we're developing that, but it's zoning that says that that's possible if a developer and private property owner see this as an opportunity and want to do it. Some things that a 3A district can't do, which is kind of similar to what we don't want to be thinking about in terms of housing opportunity areas. The state says you can't have this zoning district in an area that's severely constrained environmentally, like wetlands that are completely undevelopable. You can't put a zoning district over town hall because, you know, town hall will never be redeveloped. So you can't have the district over public or institutional land. And then you can't have the district in protected open space like parks and conserved land. So those are the parameters we're working with in terms of 3A. And I hope that's a nice just overview of some of the things we have to be thinking about in 3A. And we're again going to start focusing more on this, but I just want you to be aware of those things as we start looking at housing opportunities, as there's definitely
the areas that are zoned for 3A. First of all, we have to make zoning changes to conform to 3A. We got that right?
No.
Yeah, that would have to be passed a town meeting.
If we were saying zoning change, is it necessarily zoning changes, or is it creating just new zoning?
Well, that's a change. Oh, give me an overlay.
So
Okay.
understand there's
So-
a couple different changes that we could look at. One of them would be actually changing the zoning of property. So maybe instead of R1, it becomes R3 or whatever it is we decide to make it. The other option would be keeping the base zoning the same and then doing what's called an overlay district, where it kind of layers the different types of zoning and it builds off of each other. We have not made a decision one way or another on this yet.
Zoning has to permit something that is not today permitted, correct?
That is correct, yes.
Okay, so I consider that a zoning change, whatever terminology you want to do.
Yep.
All right.
Yep.
So the areas that are used to conform to 3A, there's nothing that says that those same areas cannot be part of the 1.5% of the town's land area that goes to conform to 40B, correct?
That is correct.
Okay.
Yeah.
And can you back up one slide, please? So the area, I mean, the notion that that 40B and the HPP is a matter of private property owners, that's great, and the town can do a lot of hand-holding with private property owners to encourage things to happen. But the leaving things as they are in the hands of private property owners does not advance our progress towards 1.5% of the town as a 40B requirement, correct?
In terms of GLAM, if it remained private property, then no. But if it was developed,
the requirement is of the 1.5% under the GLAM analysis. I assume that the 1.5% of the town's land area has to be deed restricted, correct?
right. So if one of these sites that we identify is actually developed through 40B or other means that produce affordable housing, then that would count towards GLAM. It would also count towards the subsidized housing inventory, a certain number of affordable units on that as well.
Think of a Venn diagram, right?
Yeah.
And the housing, the 40B requirements is actual development. So it's actual units and or land area,
Right.
restricted to affordability. 3A is zoning.
Yeah.
It's not actual. So there is a segment of overlap there that could accomplish both.
Right. That's what I questioned about before. But the point is that in order for land to qualify to count toward our 1.5% requirement for the 40B,
It has to be restricted.
It has to be deed restricted. So, and that if you did that to private property, that would be a taking and would essentially amount to something that the owner would have to be compensated for.
Well, a private property owner, if a developer bought a piece of property in town and decided they were going to make it a 40B compliant development, they would do the deed restriction.
Of course, but
the town.
My point is, we want to get to a point where we are not subject to having hostile 40B come into town and bulldoze over the zoning requirements. So to attain that status in the long term, we've got to have 1.5% of the land area of the town be in a deed restricted affordability situation.
Right. And theoretically, if we were going to accomplish that with a multi-family,
Could count to 3A as well.
we could zone it.
Well, is that correct though?
I think
Would it count, would 3A, because 3A has to be by right.
So
And-
3A is going to be a certain, most of that would be market rate multifamily, but we can require about 10% of that to be deed restricted affordable. So that will also help move the needle on the 40B requirements.
So would it count towards the GLAM? Would it count towards the?
As long as there's deed restricted housing built there, then it's going to help with GLAM. It's also going to help with the SHI.
The real difference is whether it's rental or ownership.
Right, but with the whole development count,
If it was rental.
3A, yeah. So if it's a 3.
For 3A, no, just the deed restricted housing in a 3A development, because that's basically like where the zoning's requiring a certain portion of that housing to be deed restricted. Only that's going to count towards 40B, SHI, GLAM. In a comprehensive permitted development, which could be one of the, we could identify a site here and then down the road, the town works with that developer to do a comp permit. If that's a rental development, then 25% of it could be affordable, 75% could be market rate. All the rental units and all the deed restricted rental units are going to count on the SHI. If it's ownership, then just the deed restricted units would count. And so if the priority is to work towards the 40B requirements, you might really want to be encouraging anybody who's doing this to really go for a rental comp permit. I think that's really what it boils.
Look, if we zone an area of town that's currently owned by the town of Nahant, and we zoned it for multifamily housing in accordance with 3A. And then we developed a 100-unit building on there, and 25% of it, and it's all rental, and 25% of it was deed restricted affordable. The entire property would count towards either SHI or GLAM, plus, because we only need 84 units to meet 3A, we'd be hitting that goal too, right?
Yeah, you could absolutely knock it all out with one punch if that development is done through a comp permit. And remember, the 40B comp permits, it overrides local zoning. It's a separate permitting process than any zoning. So theoretically, you could have an area that's zoned 3A, meeting your 3A requirements, but then the developer builds development that's through the 40B comp permitting process. And then you would be basically like, that would be like a knockout punch where you're really working towards everything. All
the town could vote to sell it into a new entity that would be, in which the developer would be a partner.
But
yeah, typically if it's like publicly owned land and you want to see it developed as affordable housing, you would do that through a disposition process where you basically request proposals from developers to see like what they would do. And then basically you'd select the one that you want and you'd say, for you to have this town-owned land, you must do this development. And that's actually where you have the most leverage to say, we want this many affordable units. If you're partnering where you're giving public land at a low cost or no cost to a partner, that really leverages finances in a way where you could get some deeply affordable housing or a lot of affordable housing. So yeah, if it's publicly owned land, you'd probably be working with a development partner and setting up an agreement where you're saying, in order to lease or own this land, you must do this development. And then you have a development agreement.
Process you just described was what was proposed to be done with the Coast Guard housing in 2008 and then got flatlined by the economy.
Well, we're looking at rentals. I guess.
Well, I'm sorry. It was a public-private development, right, as to which some portion would be affordable, but all of it would count toward the 40B tally.
No, that's not correct.
Yeah.
So that development was mixed use condos and single family homes.
Yeah.
And a percentage of the single family homes were going to be affordable. None of the condominiums were affordable. They were market rate.
They were market rate sales.
Sales.
Yeah, not rentals.
Yes, not rentals. There were no rentals in that deal. They were all owner occupied properties.
So can you go to the next slide? That last bullet there, have you guys done any mapping of what areas of town is left when you eliminate severe environmental constraints?
Yeah, so we are beginning that work now, and fortunately the state has mapping data to provide to us where we will be able to show exactly what is not eligible for 3A. And so when we start to meet specifically on 3A, we will have that prepared to inform our conversations.
But it'd be helpful to have that even in the housing production plan conversation.
Yeah, so that's a good point. Christian, could you advance the slide? Because I just want to explain kind of like how I think the conversation about opportunity areas should go tonight. And remember, we're not doing 3A right now, but this is something that is kind of a bridge towards 3A. So again, it's kind of an initial discussion. We know that the town understands where there's different opportunities. And so what we'd like to do is have Tony and Michelle present some of those opportunities for discussion, talk about them to understand a little bit more from you all about feasibility and impact for those sites. And then once we're able to kind of evaluate that, MAPC is going to take the sites that look most promising, and we're going to do a map and analysis to understand the constraints for those specific sites. And then for 3A, it'll be a little bit of a broader mapping to understand, what's not eligible per the data that the state's giving us to map. But if we could, Christian, just pull up and you could go ahead and talk while we're doing this. But Christian, could you pull up the Jamboard so I could explain just like how we're going to think about it?
Alex, does it have
Yes.
to in that order? Like, because I think that the town, I feel like the town would really like to try to accomplish both of these requirements with one, in the same breath and the same effort. So does it have, I think understanding what areas would meet the requirements of 3A would be really helpful in the committee or the town being able to identify locations for affordable housing.
No, sure, absolutely. The next time we meet, we're going to go to that next step where we have the analysis to look at. Right now is kind of more of just an initial conversation for us to really look together as a committee of like what opportunities are out there. And then we'll map the sites that look promising based on, specific constraints for the sites, but also where 3A eligibility is. So when we come time to have the next kind of phase of conversation, we'll be able to see that. We'll be able to say like, well, this site looks good and it looks like it would be eligible for 3A. So this is kind of the initial conversation that allows us to see where to focus our analysis. We'll do the 3A mapping and you'll be able to see where you can have that overlap. But what I was hoping that we could do tonight, which would really help MAPC focus the analysis, is to just learn a little bit more from you about what opportunities may be out there. And then basically, while we discuss that, we can put these sticky notes on this conceptual map. And basically, what we want to be thinking about here is horizontally moving from less feasible to more feasible. If you have a site or an area that you think is an opportunity, and you think that, generally from what it doesn't seem like there'd probably be too many constraints on that site, and that there would be more likely movement from a property owner who may want to partner, or maybe it's already publicly owned, so it would be more feasible to think about that. That's the kind of information that you have. And while you're discussing that, we would put that kind of more on the feasible side. Then working vertical, greater impact to less impact. If the site is one that's larger, where we may be able to do a comp permit to have a big impact on the SHI and GLAM, I would say that would have more impact. Or maybe it's an opportunity where it's like, hey, you know what, maybe a mixed use development here would really make a lot of sense, and we could get that laundromat or a little small business to kind of create a little bit of a gathering space, add a little bit to the commercial revenue. That could also be considered impact. So basically, you all understand the opportunities. You have this information about them. Whether they're publicly owned land. Whether the property owner has thought about doing things there in the past. So basically, we want to kind of be a sponge, take this information from you and kind of put it on this chart So we can see, because when we find properties and sites that, you know, we thought they might have been good, but really they're landing in the less feasible, less impact side. You know, maybe we don't want to focus on those. Maybe they don't really make the cut to the analysis. If we see properties that are greater impact and greater feasibility, it's like, hey, we should take a closer look at those ones, and then we could focus analysis there. So really, like, we just want to have an initial conversation with you to really make sure we understand all the information about these opportunities, look at them objectively in terms of feasibility and impact. And then we can go and do our homework and take all of the analysis to you next time. So then you could really look and see, okay, this is what the constraints are. These are the ones that could potentially also be 3A opportunities as well. Does that approach make sense? Any thoughts about that? Any questions about that?
It's fine.
Okay.
You had me thinking though, while you were speaking about 3A, one more quick question on that.
Sure.
So the whole town is zoned for single family currently. Mm-hmm. There's some business district too. But there are some pre-existing multifamily homes in the town. In fact, in the business district, they're kind of like a mixed use because they have commercial on the ground floor and residential above them. But they're not zoned for that currently, even though that's what exists there. Mm-hmm. So if we were to overlay that with multifamily mixed, like, would that count towards 3A?
Yeah, and I think that would be something that we want to reflect on our mapping as well, is to say, like, here's where some multifamily that, you know, would be considered non-conforming basically was built before zoning came into place, so it's not consistent with zoning now. But the built environment, that area, like you said, has multifamily. Some of them have commercial on the front floor, and
they might be in severely, environmental constraint issues there too.
Yeah, and
that's the way my brain works is, like you said, show me what we can't do, and then show me what we already have that would qualify. We would just need to overlay it, and then what's the gap from that point? You know, how many more units are we trying to accomplish?
You think of the existing non-conforming, the areas where there's
I wouldn't expect much of a challenge from the public.
No, I just talked about attaining the density, 15 units per acre.
Well, I had a question earlier. What does 15 units per acre look like? I don't think I have a qualitative understanding of what is that, a triple decker? Is that a 2-family home, on a small lot? Is that, what does that housing look like? And it does what we have in our business district already conform to that? Is that or would it just allow for a little bit of expansion of some?
Yeah, it depends. And we could do some visualization next time to kind of help out with thinking about it. But I mean, if it's a small site and you're trying to get 15 units per acre there, generally it's going to be a medium-sized multifamily building. But if it's a larger area, then it could be more spread out. Then it might mean you're talking about smaller multifamily buildings spread out. And that's why it's also nice to have the option to not have to do just one 3A zone. You could do multiple, and then combined, they just have to meet that density, which allows you to kind of have the ability to not maybe do a big dense development.
Right, but I mean, so let's say you're going to have 3 parcels that are going to comprise your total 3A zoning. They've got to collectively be zoned such that they collectively permit 84 units. That's our threshold.
15 per acre.
Correct, and per acre.
Yeah.
So, for example, in the downtown area that we were just conjecturing about, you could modify the zoning for 3A purposes to permit, let's say, adding another story to the structures, or in other words, to to basically transcend the existing height limits.
If needed, even if
Yeah,
it
I
might
know.
not be necessary,
Yeah,
because
yeah.
we have. Like 5, above the fish store, I think there's 5 units, I think above. The house next door to the left, I think there's 4 units, above the real estate's another 4 units, I think, so. You start adding those together.
Right.
And if you're doing a affordable. How many units were on Goddard Drive in 2008? In that proposal?
Oh, you mean houses?
In the
proposed, as they proposed.
So I think it was 20 two bedroom condos and either somewhere between 5 to 8 houses.
Yeah, so. I'm just, so you got.
Conceptualizing, yeah.
If you had 20 in the business district on the hot road.
Yeah.
Right?
You only need 64 more.
Now you got 20 over there, so you start to piece things together that way.
Yeah.
Anyways, we should move to the next step.
Yeah, so basically, if Tony or Michelle, you just want to pull up the town GIS website and walk us through some of the, the opportunities that you're aware of from, ongoing conversations and movement over the years. And then just kind of discuss the feasibility and the impact of each. And then on our end, we'll write those on sticky notes and put them where we think they might land based on your conversation. And then when you're done with that, we'll pull up the this map
So we
again.
can't share, we're not gonna be able to share. If you guys want to see the zoning map.
Yeah, so I can stop sharing and make you able to share if that is what your preference is.
Yeah, and then
Yeah.
you guys on the opportunity areas. Okay, great.
What's the opportunity area?
What they just showed us.
Oh,
So I just made you host, Michelle.
I also just want to ground everybody in a quick time check. We got about 20 minutes to 9 o'clock. I'm sure if we run a little bit over, it's okay, but I do want to be respectful of the time that we had here on the agenda.
Can you see them now?
Now, yes.
Yeah, we can see that. Thanks.
Tony, your preference, where you want to start?
Let's start Bass Point and then we'll work our way, I guess, east. South. The other way.
I know, but it's not refreshing.
Oh,
That's,
yeah.
that's the...
GIS, you gotta give it a second. It'll catch up.
Yeah.
So, I guess where I would start is actually to the left there, Michelle's Bass Point Apartments. So, this is not town land. It is currently a multifamily development. It's all apartments. They do have additional spaces you guys can see, where their green spaces and tennis court and stuff like that. It's possible that either they'd be interested in an expansion, a partnership, a conversion of existing units or something like that, but there's definitely some space in this area.
I would also suggest that, in terms of existing multifamily, that would, meet our 3A requirements within the overlay.
that's what you're talking about, right? So,
Yeah.
Yeah, well, and potentially, new development for affordability.
okay.
Yeah,
But certainly, there, do we know how many units are?
I think it's 120.
120 or 140.
Oh.
So it's that many.
Yeah.
I mean, so you, I mean, we could almost zone this 3A and
Be done.
be done.
So, section that Tony's talking about is, if you just follow my cursor, this is Bass Point Road right here. This is Seabreeze Lane, and these buildings here are the development for apartments. But he's talking about this section of about 35,000 square feet in here, which if we try to, or what we're thinking is approaching the owners of the property to see if they would be interested in, you know, working with the town and helping them identify a developer to help and give them some, you know, give backs here in terms of, you know, building out that.
So this space, again, you know, there's been zero communication with the property owners to date about this, but we just identified on the map as existing multifamily rental property in a development style, you know, setup. It could either be a 3A solution, it could also expand into potential affordable housing.
So it's not in shape there, but this is it right here.
You know, next I think is the obviously Coast Guard housing. We have a current plan established by town meeting to demolish all of those homes and sell the individual private lots. And the real goal for that is to raise enough funds to pay off the loan, which is about $1.8 million. So there's been discussion in the, you know, in the town about, and even some members of this committee about, you know, rethinking that. I'm not saying, you know, I'm in favor of it or against it, but just throwing it on the wall as another item.
The current status of town meeting action on those properties is that they authorize the selectmen to do as you just described, to sell them off.
Mhm.
And there may be planning at the selectmen's level, but that's that. In other words, the selectmen are not obliged to take that course of action. They could change their plan. And I'm wondering whether, in light of, you know, the things that we're considering, whether I don't know when the debt comes due. But,
January of 2025.
okay, might be worth considering refinancing, you know, because it made sense to finance the town's holding of it for at the time, you know, that the Coast Guard was doing away with it, so it didn't get into the hands of the developer. And that could keep our options open to do a number of things. And with today's values, even if you did go forward with the plan that is currently the selectmen have, you might only need to sell 2 of those to raise the money to pay the note.
So, you know, again, I don't want to go too far in one direction or the other. Certainly, would you know, any change in plan would require a town meeting vote as well.
Wait a minute. I thought we just agreed that the town meeting authorized but did not direct selectmen to sell the properties.
But did not authorize the selectmen to do anything else.
Okay, so yes.
Yes.
Approved by the voters.
So just as a word of caution, there was opposition to the, I think it was 25 or 28 unit plan originally. So there probably would be opposition to that level. There seemed to be less opposition to 2-family or, you know, multi units, but keeping it smaller scale.
I think every single property we like identify tonight is gonna have a long list of, you know,
There'll be
challenges.
contingencies on everything.
And
Yes.
you know, I don't want what we're doing tonight to give off the impression that, you know, there are irons in the fire already on these things. There isn't irons in the fire anywhere. tonight's effort, I think, is really high level of, here are some areas that could occur. We're not saying they should, we're not saying they're, you know, on its way or anything like that. But yeah, I know it's a sensitive subject matter, and you know, I think a lot, and pretty much anything that we bring up is going to be sensitive.
Yeah, but this is also in the 15 years as that plan was proposed and shot down and so forth. The overall housing pressure has accelerated, and that's one reason that we've got 3A, because of the general lack of housing, and that's one of the responses of the legislature for that. And there are more and more communities that are facing hostile 40Bs, and you know, our collective town can't have it both ways. You can't object to everything and still be bulletproof from 40B.
So just to clarify, is that plan wasn't shot down? The housing market tanked.
Yeah, fair enough.
I just want to make sure, because other people will see this, and I want to clarify. It was ever shot down by the voters or the board of selectmen. We were actively working towards getting that plan to come to fruition.
The rezoning was shot.
So
That's-
everyone,
we'll
just
figure out.
a quick time check. We're 10 minutes from 9. I know that there's a lot to dig into on this one, and everyone I think is very familiar with a lot of things about it. So I think I'm just suggest that we move on, because I know there's a lot of.
I'll keep going.
Okay.
Obviously, as we talked about, protected open space, you know, eliminates anything in the Bailey's Hill area, Triangle area. So as we continue north, similarly, you know, this area is the Johnson School, the DPW, the fire station.
Oh, Michelle's catching up.
Sorry, Michelle.
We're scrolling.
I'm over by the school. I'm just, you know, working my way that way.
That's fine. Go ahead.
It's open space, but it's protected open space. It's for public use.
Yeah, that might be there.
Yeah. The details.
Yeah.
Yeah.
There you go.
Yeah, so that's the golf course, that's the Flash Road Park, it's the schoolyard. You know, not only is there wetlands issues, but it's also protected open space or public, for public use. Michelle, Fox Hill Road. So you'll notice, on Fox Hill Road, there are some town-owned property lots. There's a paper, Ward Road actually is a paper road that extends all the way to Flash Road. You can see it on the screen here. These
There's 4 house lots.
4 house lots that are actually behind existing homes. They don't have, there isn't an existing street now. I think they would have frontage if there was.
Well, the right side of that is Ward Road. So if you extend that piece on, you'll have it. And then coming off of Fox Hill, you can connect the two. Because then that will meet the requirements, because you can't have a dead end street.
What's the name of the road that would be extended, Michelle?
It's Ward Road.
Ward?
So it's,
WARD.
Thank you.
so it's the same road that you would travel on to get into the beach parking lot. Which that's a nice, that I like this one, because if we can just combine all the lots to make it one buildable lot, then you can do something else on it instead of, you know, maximize as much as you can for the number of units out there.
This is an area that is prone to flooding. It's not technically wetlands.
But you can build them on islands.
Yeah, oh, no question. I just wanted to, I mean, that being prone to flooding does not trigger the restriction we just saw on the screen as wetlands. Okay, right.
Yeah, the road itself might be very close to the wetlands if it was built. That might be the issue.
Yeah.
We could take a look at that specifically when we do our mapping.
They were just we picked up on them looking at, this GIS of. You can see they're labeled 51, 52, 53, 54. They're owned by the town. And they're not built, they're not developed, so. There's really nothing north of that. There's nothing really in Little Nahant, so moving eastward.
There's the dump.
There's the dump.
We had this conversation. This
I
conversation.
can see there's a lot number 35 right up a Spring Road. That's where the basketball court currently is. And then Michelle was also showing there's a lot number 25. Yeah, you just gotta go slower than Michelle. C25 off of Flash Road, kind of right there where her house is. So there are 2 lots owned by the town. Again, you're gonna be dealing with wetland issues. Frontage issues on number 25.
It's got a spike stamp coming out to the road.
Looks like wetlands back there, obviously.
Yeah,
Yeah.
like I said, I'm just identifying undeveloped.
Yeah.
Space. I'm not pushing it or, one way or the other. Just everything that everything we talk about is gonna have some limitation. The next big open space there is to your right is the cemetery.
Before we skip over, do you want to just highlight the business district area?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Sure, so 46, 48. Uh, 46, 47, 48, 50, 53, and 54 are all multi-family buildings. Currently, some of them are mixed use with commercial.
Off Nahant Road.
Yeah.
So you have some non-conforming multifamily there.
Yeah.
Well, also mostly mixed use.
Mostly mixed use, yeah. So definitely something that could satisfy our FBA requirements. Even though, if we do fast point apartments, we don't need to do it.
Yeah,
That's right.
it might be good to do just because it's reflecting what's actually. And encourage people to conform to whatever the zoning says.
Yeah, and if there's any, I don't know if the current zoning limits, improvement to the existing properties on the road there. But, where they wouldn't actually change what they are, but, maybe once you touch something, it ends up being.
Well, we also had this problem with the fire in Little Nahant where, they just didn't apply for permits in time, after the fire.
Yeah,
So they lost their right
Yeah.
to rebuild.
Well, it was the same thing on Castle Road where the meat market was too. They lost their right to be a business. So now the only thing that can be there is a single family.
So those, right, that was a business.
Yeah, the pharmacy.
Yep, the
Yeah.
pharmacy.
Yeah.
Those are interesting elements where the town could incentivize, their permeability through potentially some sort of affordable element in their project.
Right, the zoning. There's some limits on what you could do to revise the zoning. There's a lot of flexibility in terms of.
And I'm not, again, I'm not, as we talked about earlier, it's not even that we're suggesting, it has to be a 40% income household in order to allow you to build there again. If you did an 80%, you're talking about worse. You're talking about middle class folks who are looking for their first home. It's possible that, you could come to some solution there. So moving on, you know, that whole open space in the middle with the cul-de-sac, that's the cemetery, so obviously. We're not gonna be changing that. Yeah, number 50 there is off of Greystone Road. It connects all the way up to High Street. This area has previously been identified as expansion property for the cemetery. What we thought was a possibility is that the lower half, so from behind you can see that square right where the number 50 is, that's the cell tower. So right where that number 50 is, down towards Greystone Road, we could use for affordable housing. It's right where existing affordable housing is with the Housing Authority, Spindrift and Greystone Road properties. As Alex was saying earlier, if you got into a partnership agreement with a developer, you could almost almost work out some sort of like senior living, senior center that somehow combines with the existing Housing Authority property and, really kind of transform that area.
Do this one.
Nope, I think you're still
You
there.
guys still there?
Still have you for a minute.
Ooh.
Yeah, no, that's all good information. Are there any other sites or areas you want to identify before we take a look at where they fall on the conceptual map?
So these are all town homeland that we talked about. We
talked a little bit about
Yes,
business.
in the business.
Business,
That's all.
And the Bass Point.
I mean, the only other thing is like, if there's a foreclosure that comes up in the future, or another property that, where the home probably can't be saved for some reason, those are options too, to, try to buy and then, develop.
So
if you keep going along Nahant Road, you get to like the church property. Again, it's not town-owned property. Beyond that, you get to the country club property, again, not owned by the town. I don't know if that country club property is protected open space.
Probably is.
I know there's a historical,
Yeah.
I know there's historical protection on the building, but
it's a convoluted ownership.
Yes.
Well, I mean, the fact that the ownership structure is convoluted, that could be fixed by selling it to it. I mean, they have the power to sell that property. The question is whether it's protected. How do you get the status of being protected open space?
if in the deed it was originally dedicated for open space, it would be protected for that.
So I mean, that's okay. That's another form of deed restriction.
Yeah.
Hmm.
I'm not only identifying it because it's a place in the middle of town that doesn't have any houses on it. Right. Again, not pushing any of these in one direction or the other.
I mean, has there been any kind of interest from that property owner, or any conversations at all about?
No, like I said, there's no irons in the fire on any of these things. It's really, we're really just throwing darts at a map right now. And if you keep going, there really isn't any other town-owned property on this side of town other than the wharf, Lodge Park, both of those, Marjoram Park at the wharf, those are not going to be sites that we would.
What's the 18 off Wharf Street? Just looks like a big parcel without building on it, but
18 off Wharf Street.
yeah.
Oh, that might be the, so that's actually owned by the Audubon. It's a, it's a wildlife sanctuary.
Okay, makes sense.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's not gonna happen.
I was just curious. It looked like a big lion. See.
Actually, though, I've never quite figured out what's the status of its land to the southeast of Furbush, or is this Furbush? I guess it is. Over in here.
Yeah, so this road doesn't exist currently.
Ah, okay.
Paper street, this is that paper street, right, paper road right there.
Right,
It's
and-
up in
and-
Whitney. something.
Yeah, it's the Whitney Estate, which is owned by Tom Costin's son. Yeah.
It might be worth pointing out, this is a paper road over
Yeah.
here.
Yeah, I skipped over that, there's another paper road.
Yeah.
Pond Street extends along the golf course to Willow Road.
Well, do we know the status of the land on the southeast side of that?
Yeah, there's 8 or 9 house lots over there in private trust. They're in wetlands, that's 100% wetlands, but could it be buildable? Sure, I can put it on filings. I know there's like all these caveats to that, but you know, again, opportunity, right? If you can listen, if you look at the Seaport District in Boston, that was all underwater at one point, right? So any of this can be developed.
Yeah.
What was the name of that one? Like, how should we identify that one for analysis?
So it's Pond Street Extension.
Which is currently a paper street.
Yeah,
Is also been approached.
yeah.
Yeah.
There's a fence across the paper.
Yeah.
We anticipate that there are
Yeah,
wetlands. there.
details afterwards, so that won't be a problem.
We know who controls the private trust.
Yeah, it's in public records, it's the sale deeds, we can find out. Can always send a registered letter and see if they'll welcome a conversation. Listen, I've done some of this, and it can be done. It just, you know, we just have to, how hard do we want to go after it? That's all.
Right. Or is it better as open space?
Yeah, that's the thing. Yeah.
Well, yeah.
Well, that's the thing. I think these are all, we talk about the town pieces, right? It's how we rank and rate them, right? Which has, again, minimal viable product, as I always call it. That, you know, does it solve, like, you know, does Bass Point solve all of the things that we need to solve for? Possibly. Could another property do that? Combination, it's just great opportunities out there. We just have to dig it a little bit deeper.
Okay. Before we lose everybody, it might be worth pointing out the Edge Hill Apartments. There's another existing apartment complex.
Now, road.
So that's gonna be on the hot road in between winter and summer. Yeah, right there.
Yeah, you can see that.
Well, if I can find my house and then where I grew up, my house that I grew up on the hot road, then I can triangulate all around. But
Yeah, I don't know how many offhand. Do we any?
I don't know off the top of my head, so we need to see if I can look it up.
That one will probably almost has a better chance of being outside of the restricted areas of 3A. More, you know, I wonder if
Which one now?
Edge Hill
Yeah.
versus Bass Point Apartments.
I mean, I
Well,
don't know.
It sounds like it should be on our radar to see where it lands with the 3A mapping.
Yeah. I mean, I read the wetlands restrictions on 3A more as it's really unbuildable wetlands, but if we have existing buildings,
Yeah,
you know, you think it should be eligible. for
Yeah.
3A.
And John,
So,
isn't
but that may,
parts of the parcel, but not like necessarily the entire parcel?
Yeah, so this will make more sense once we're able to start taking a look at the maps and seeing where the non-buildable land is. But if we had a parcel and half of it was wetland and half of it wasn't, there would be some data in there from DHCD that says this parcel, 50% of it has what they're calling buildable land. So it means that that 50% would count towards all the calculations of stuff that we could build on there, and the other 50% wouldn't. So it's not necessarily does this parcel qualify or not qualify, because of a lot of the stuff you said earlier, Michelle, about being able to combine parcels and work on some bigger projects or something like that. So DHCD recognizes that just because the way things look now doesn't mean they're going to continue to look like that in the future. So there's a little bit of some mix and match on how this non-available, non-developable land looks. It is certainly not a perfect system by any stretch, and it's certainly not without scrutiny and controversy. That said, it's really what we're looking at here, and they are looking at it in a way of just being able to say, this is how much of the parcel you can develop on, and this is how much you can't.
Tony, I think on the town tour, you took us to those sites near like the Knights of Columbus and Bayside that could
Yep. That's
you
it.
go
Yeah,
over-
so that's not town-owned land.
right, yeah.
There's the Bayside, it's between Range Road and Nectar Place, Gardner Road. Yeah, so this isn't town-owned, it's the property owner of Bayside also owns the adjacent lot, and then the Knights of Columbus is the next property in there too.
Thinking of that is eligible for what?
Developable space potentially, but not owned by the town.
So a situation where there might be some interest from a property owner where the town might want to encourage them to do something there, basically. But totally up to them, whatever would happen there.
Yeah, again.
There is eminent domain.
Yeah,
I don't think you
I
can
don't
really-
think we're that far, need to be thinking about that, but. Again, it's an identified area, that, could fit well. But there's, again, absolutely no fire in the fire at this moment.
Yeah, and at this level, I would really like get away from thinking about eminent domain. And we're really more so thinking about where we want to have a conversation with a private property owner to see like what they might be interested in. Could lead to the town thinking about buying or acquiring the property in some way down the road, but just thinking about areas where we might want to have conversations, basically. Is there any other areas that you want to make sure that we're aware of before we begin the mapping?
There are definitely other existing multifamily buildings, condos, at the end of Maple Ave, and there's the Anchorage at the intersection of Wharf and Willow. There's I forget what those condos are.
Rockledge is in Willow, Anchorage is in Gas Point at the end of Maple Ave.
Yeah.
And
so, I couldn't identify all the pre-existing multifamily homes, off the top of my head, but that would be, as far as 3A compliance goes, or as we get down the road and discuss accessory dwelling units and things of that nature, those are things that we would want to take a look at. But
I would just add maybe that if there are clusters of those types of housing that we want to take a look at, maybe incorporating into an overlay zone or another.
Yeah. Okay. If that's most of everything, I just want to pull up the Jamboard, Christian, if you could give us the screen share again, please, Michelle, and then because as you've been talking, I've been writing these on notes and kind of putting them on our little impact feasibility chart.
no, get out of the menu. Then see at the top of the GIS map, there's a red thing that says stop share.
oh, sorry.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Okay. And then Christian, if you want to pull up the Jamboard.
I'm not the host yet, so oh, never mind. Spoke too soon.
Yours.
Okay, so just
Alex, I can't help but see the newborn baby like impact on your face.
what, my lack of sleep?
Exactly. As we're approaching the 9 o'clock hour here.
Oh yeah, I get about 3.5 hours a night.
Not bad, huh?
Trying to convince my wife to do sleep training, which I'm referring to as sleep teaching. But there's a big thing about whether that's something you should do or not. So we're trying to reach consensus. You know, we might get there, but you'll probably reach consensus on these sites before then.
You're doing great, Alex.
A harder challenge than 3A.
Yeah. But I want to just do a little bit like of a check. I mean, as you were talking, I started to kind of put these on a conceptual map based on some of the things that you were saying. And I just want to make sure that they more or less align with your understanding. I put Bass Point as well. First off, let me explain the colors. So I put pink if it was something that you were mentioning because you thought it might be a place where you could do 3A. Bass Point came up as an opportunity for potentially 3A and working towards 40B in a development. So I put that in green. So it's both. And then others that could potentially be opportunities for development, either of town-owned land or encouraging private property owners, I put in yellow. So Bass Point I put over here because it seems like, you know, there's existing larger scale multifamily there already. If we're just talking about putting a zone there, that's kind of what you were all talking about. So it seemed like feasibility was kind of there. And then also in terms of impact, looks like there might be some opportunity to build housing if they were interested, but it also could have a big impact on just 3A compliance. So I put it over here based on what you were saying there. With the Coast Guard, I saw this as more feasible because it's already town owned. There's been a lot of planning gone into it already. There's authorization, at least for something to happen. It also appears to be an area where, depending on what could happen there could be a substantial chunk of housing and affordable housing. So that's why I put it there.
I suggest that you make that green.
Green, okay. Coast Guard, we will change to
Same
green.
with Greystone Road. I don't see it.
It's right under.
Greystone Road right here.
Yeah.
Green. Okay, so that's the one that's identified as cemetery expansion, but you could do some kind of partnership. Do you see that as more or less impactful? You think it should be north or south of the?
I think it'd be more.
I think it's more impactful.
Yeah.
So like maybe about here.
Yeah.
Okay. The areas that you were talking about where you have like the existing business district and some non-conforming multifamily, I put it as more feasible because we're talking about this in terms of 3A zoning. And if there's already multifamily there, you know, I think it's, you know, reasonable to say like we could do some 3A zoning there. It doesn't seem like there would be like a whole lot of ability to build housing, but definitely some impact in terms of 3A compliance, maybe a smaller 3A district possibility for that. So I put those ones, you know, kind of just right of feasibility and kind of like just north of impact. Does that sound right to you?
Yeah.
Okay. Fox Hill Road town owned properties, because there's a town owned and there's a paper street back there. I see it as you know, kind of on the east side of feasibility. I see that they're vacant, so you could definitely do some housing. I don't see like a big development there, so I'd maybe, you know, kind of like put it around here. Does that make sense?
Well, wait a minute. I mean, you could join, there's 20, I had it up, it's like 25,000 square feet. You could join all the properties and do, you know, apartments or condos or something.
Yeah, I think my only concern would be the
What?
wetlands.
Yeah.
That's where I think it makes sense to be a little less feasible because of mostly because of the road, I think, not the plot itself.
Yeah.
Yeah, and sewer connection, you know, the utility stuff is, I see it on the left side of. Yeah, on the less feasible side.
Yeah.
And I see it more towards the middle as far as. I guess impact, I don't know, you like you said, Michelle, it could go either way,
Yeah.
depending on how you do it. But Greystone move up on impact.
Greystone's higher, yeah.
You see Greystone is more impactful than Fox Hill.
Yes.
Okay, and do you see the Coast Guard is more impactful than both of those?
Maybe.
Both Greystone and Fox Hill?
I think you're gonna, I'm measuring impact by number of possible units, is that right?
That would be one of the main things. Yeah, it could also mean like you could see like a nice opportunity to do like a little mixed use there, or like you see the opportunity maybe not for a lot of units, but a lot of affordable units, more deeply affordable units.
I see Greystone, especially with the housing authority being right there and potential like community center or some sort of combo, you know, additional piece to it as more impactful than Coast Guard housing.
Are there plans to relocate the police station?
So there are not. Last year we secured funding for phase 1 of the needs assessment on both the police and fire station. And that needs assessment would help. It's phase 1 of basically whether we would relocate into a public safety building or a, you know, 2 new buildings or 1 new building and 1 remodel, you know, how there's a long process there that we haven't started yet, but we got approval the previous town meeting to spend funds on starting the process. It seems like there's only so much bandwidth of major public comment processes, right? So we had short-term rental stuff going on. We just got through Coast Guard stuff, Coast Guard housing stuff. Now we're getting the housing production plan. You know, there's the planning board has talked about master plans, you know, master plan process. So, you know, with such a small town, you know, you want public input, but people aren't going to attend a public meeting every week. So it's hard to take on too many of these big issues at the same time that you are going to want public input, you know.
So I think we've dealt with, well, where would we see the Spring Road and the Flash Road town-owned sites falling? I kind of had them on a little less feasibility because it seemed like there's anticipation of some environmental constraints.
Yeah, and I don't know how much, and I don't know what I think impact, you could put them both in the same spot, I would think of.
Less impact, less feasibility.
Yeah.
Yeah.
South of the southwest corner there.
Okay. And then we know like that the dump site, you know, is a big site, but it's got all kinds of issues. So I'll put it over here. Dealing with like these 4 privately owned areas where we might think about doing some encouragement or partnership or having some conversations about possibilities. Where do we see all these landing? I think it might be helpful to think about them in relation to each other. So the Pond Street extension, I heard that there's definitely some anticipated wetland issues there. So I had it on the west side of feasible. Do you see that as maybe not as big? You know, maybe when we take a closer look, it might not be as bad.
So I think it's definitely less feasible, probably on the line of less impact just because of its location, and then not sure. I mean, it's basically an absent owners. They just own the land.
Yeah. Maybe less feasible and less impact than the dump.
Yeah.
I think.
Oh, even less than the dump.
Yeah, I mean, the dump
Yeah.
is a large.
The dump could be reconfigured.
Yeah.
It definitely could be reconfigured.
It's not, yeah, it's pretty, not very feasible, but it could.
Yeah.
It could
So
happen.
less
Or-
impact, or sorry, yeah, less impact than the dump. Do you see the dump as more feasible or less feasible than the Pond Street in terms of like constraints?
The two properties that we identified, like right off Spring Road, and I guess the property off Spring Road, there is it is a park with a basketball court, so.
In back is the dump. But we, you know, use it for composting, so feasibility,
Yeah.
we'd have to repurpose it.
I'd say the Spring Road side is the most feasible out of those three.
Side of what?
The entrance to the dump.
Oh, right.
And then the Flash Road one was the one that was kind of like shoehorned behind these two properties.
Yeah.
It's really, you know, I would say that's gonna be very tough because of lack of frontage and it being, you know, in such a wetland area, an undeveloped wetland area. And then same, you know, Pond Street extension, you know, that too, there's no road that goes to it now. And it's all undeveloped, you know, protected wetland area, so it's very unfeasible in my opinion.
Are we on the same page about what definition really puts something in the category of being wetlands as opposed to being, I mean, this area of Castle Road is all floodable.
I think we'll have a clearer picture of that when we take this information and we look at the sites in depth and also have
Yeah.
the map.
So
These post-its are movable.
yeah, so
Yeah.
there are wetlands information in the Walmart in it as well. So you can add those boundaries in the map and look at to see exactly, you know, someone's house, 25% of it could be in wetlands and the rest of it is. We have some of that.
I'm assuming that what qualifies as wetlands is distinct from an area that's within the floodplain.
That's in the GIS map too.
Yeah,
So you have all of it.
Well,
that's
okay,
what we'll look at.
the definitions are not the same. I mean, the floodplain is something, wetlands is something else.
You're right. And then
Right.
what I'm saying too is like those properties being undeveloped, like like their habitat for wildlife currently, that adds a whole nother level, a challenge, another obstacle. Versus, you know, green space that is wetland or in the wetland, you know, zone. Or in the buffer zone, but it's not, you know, may not be as much of a challenge.
Yeah, we're running up on 9:30, so just to close the loop on this, I just am curious about where the Knights of Columbus and Bayside, which I kind of think about together, and the church-owned property off Nahant Road, where would you see those in relation to each other?
I guess because they're currently developed, they're certainly on the more feasible side.
Well, they're not currently developed,
But they're not.
that's housing.
No, right,
Yeah.
right. So less environmental issues, but zoning challenges, ownership challenges. I don't know.
I think we have to assume that zoning is within our hands.
We're gonna still have environmental issues with the Bayside and Nice condos, they're sitting on the water.
But less,
Sitting on
less than,
They're sitting on the water.
but less than, I would say. You know, like the Palm Street extension.
Yeah, they're elevated, so I think they're probably.
maybe be outside of the floodplain because of their elevation, yeah.
They might have to be set back to not sound redeveloped.
Okay.
Yeah,
We'd have to get a map up.
Yeah, it's beyond.
there's one private home in the center of that development, the Bayside and the Knights. You know anything about that?
I thought it was.
It's the same.
It's the same.
Side.
It's a dwelling.
Yes.
Right. So it would that be for mixed use? Redevelopment?
Well, I mean,
That's their home. They don't-
it went if you were.
Yeah. Up there. Right behind, right behind. Center.
I want to just wrap up so that we can talk about what JPC is going to be doing to prepare for our next meeting. But just to close the loop on this, is there any thoughts on the church-owned property off Nahant Road?
Yeah, I mean, that would have to be clearly an eminent domain taking unless the church wanted to give it to the town for, solely with the deed restriction of that, it's affordable housing. Other than that, I don't see it, I mean.
Well, somebody told me that property is subject to a reversion to the pre-existing owner. It ceases to be a church.
Really?
I mean, we should look at the deed about that.
Wow, well,
And,
so
I mean,
that predates me because that building is the second church that was built on that location. The first one burnt in a fire in 1966 or 67.
Old restriction potentially.
That's going farther than that.
Right.
Wow, so that's going to be a good one to look at.
Okay, well, this gives us just a sense of where to focus on our analysis on. I mean, I think we could certainly eliminate the Pond Street extension. We'll do our due diligence on these other ones to make sure that those constraints that were mentioned are actually significant. But I mean, this isn't too many for us to put on a map and see where they fall in terms of the DHCD's maps and the other layers we can add for like floodplain, wetlands, environmental contaminants. So we'll take a look at all of that. Christian, if you could stop sharing this and pull the presentation up, I'll just walk over some of the next things that you can expect us to be working on in preparation for the next meeting and where we're kind of going from here. Yeah,
we're considering because there's no cleric living there now.
So is.
I thought that
yes, I think Father Bill is living there.
I'm sorry, what?
I think Father Bill is living there, isn't
I don't know. I was told that the Catholic Church is served by somebody who also serves Swansea.
he? Right, but I think he lives there.
Oh, right.
I thought it was.
okay. So just to so that everybody's aware, we've had some updates to the timeline for the HPP and 3A. So essentially, you can see here that we really, when this project was scoped and contracted, we were set to begin in July. There was just some administrative delays in getting the contract finalized and signed by the town and MAPC, and that didn't happen until October. And then I believe our first committee meeting was actually in early November. So just because the project didn't kick off on time, it was about like 3.5 months delayed. We essentially, boiling it all down, are basically recovering those 3 months and adding them to the end here. So rather than wrapping up in July with the housing production plan, we are now planning to have it drafted pretty much by the end of the summer and presented to the boards for review in the fall. And basically, what you can expect if you looked down at the last row from the bottom, the second last row from the bottom about our committee meetings. So just here tonight, we recapped the first forum. We got a sense of what goals we like, and that basically allows MAPC to draft some recommendations that work towards those goals. And so what we're going to do is draft up those goals explained in writing now that we kind of got a green light from you that you think they sound right. And we're going to also draft some recommendations pertaining to those goals. And you're going to get that in advance of the next meeting with MAPC so that you can have a chance to review it, offer us some initial thoughts on it, and then we can make some adjustments based on that. And then we can meet again next month together to really focus in on those recommendations to make sure that we all like them, that we feel like they're appropriate to bring to the public, to ask for their input and thoughts on them. And then that will be the focus of the second forum, which is planned for June. So you can expect to have a draft of some recommendations as food for thought in the next 2 weeks to make sure that you have plenty of time to review it and discuss it before we meet all together in May. You can also expect some materials to begin working towards promoting that forum. I know it sounds a little bit early, but June will be upon us before we know it. And as we had a nice discussion about tonight, we really want to be proactive in getting as many people to the forum as possible and really getting other groups that may not have been as well represented at the first forum an opportunity to come into things. And we're also, Christian is also working on some possibilities and options for some online engagement as well. But essentially, what you need to know is the project for the HPP was a little delayed in starting up, so it's just been set back a little bit. And then if Christian, if you go to the next slide, what we've also done based on that is put the 3A timeline to shift a little bit, whereas you can see MAPC, as we've discussed tonight, is going to begin the technical work on this in terms of the mapping to help us really hone in on potential 3A locations. You got a little bit of an overview of what a 3A compliant district looks like for Nahant tonight. And in our mapping discussion, we were certainly thinking about the HPP and 3A, but you can expect us to be doing the technical mapping work to give us that information we need to really understand, where these overlaps may be, where may we have some potential opportunity areas that also could potentially be 3A areas. And so basically the HPP, as long as it's, all approved and everything, will be done in October. And then I think that'll be a really good foundation for us to really dive in and focus all of our efforts on 3A. And basically, the town expressed to MAPC that they'd really like to have a lot of our support in preparing not just the 3A location for districts in the 3A bylaw, but also support in getting that understood by the public, building support for that leading into town meeting. And so that's another reason for this updated timeline, is so that we can really focus in on also offering our support to the town in preparing for a town meeting. So those are the updates to the timeline. This is something that more of an administrative thing between the town and MAPC. But if you have any questions about that, I would just suggest to get in touch with Tony. But for our purposes, I think you can just expect that MAPC's, as we've discussed, doing the mapping work on 3A. We're really going to start getting into that. And you can expect us to be working towards completing the HPP in October, and then really exclusively moving into 3A at the end of the fall and moving into the new year to prepare for the spring town meeting in May 24th.
No, this is good, because I know this is something you've been asking, so happy to see it.
Yes, and we will certainly share the details with you as well, Michelle. Just now that we've got our housing manager back, and we wanted that they've got a good sense of everything too. And we're all on the same page. I think we're moving in a really good direction. So
when do we want to meet in May? So two things. One, solidifying the date for the next community engagement, and then two, when do we want to meet in May?
Why don't we work backwards?
Yeah, so MAPC, Well, MAPC needs about 2 weeks to draft goals and recommendations in writing. If you would like to meet as a committee to discuss them, or you would like to just read that on your own and maybe submit your thoughts to Michelle, that's really up to you. But I'd say if you're going to schedule your own meeting, please give us 2 weeks to give you a draft.
Okay.
And then I think that it would probably make sense for us to meet together a month from now. So say the week of May 15th or the week of May 22nd, which would prime us to have a discussion about those recommendations and prepare for the forum in June.
All right, so I don't want to do the week of, I don't know, consult with town meeting, but like the week of May 15th leads into town meeting, so I don't want to take away from his stuff, so.
Give me space now.
Yes.
Don't just
And-
high stress.
Yeah.
Would it be before or after that would be better?
I'm sorry, what?
I think before, if you're gonna use town meeting as a potential
Yeah.
opportunity to give out handouts,
Yeah,
you're gonna want to meet before then to finalize the date, finalize what the handout's gonna look like.
Yeah, so how's May 8th look? It's a Monday. Oh, Mike, you can't meet, May 9th.
It's good.
May 9th, I believe works for us. I don't want to speak for John or Christian, but
All right,
I'm not sure, because Tuesdays we tend to have some.
okay. When is the 6th grade graduation?
That's on my calendar.
Shit, it's not on mine yet. Last day of school was June 15th.
Okay. Is it a week before, 2 weeks before, the 1st or the 8th? So last day of school is the 15th. Is the 15th the day we want to do the community engagement?
Oh, I would do it before then.
I have the 14th, Wednesday the 14th,
Okay.
hold for Johnson's graduation.
Anyways.
And flag day.
Okay, so that's dates out, so that week's out. So then the week of the 19th. I would do it the week before. Do we think the week before June 5th?
Because a lot of parents start taking their kids away for.
All right,
Sounds good.
vacations.
that's a good point too.
I'm sorry, what day we talking about again?
Week of June 5th to hold the next community engagement, which is going to be virtual. So we don't need any other commitments from town hall. We just have to figure out whether our Zoom technology can hold, more than say 200 people, 300 people. I don't know.
Yeah. The B Blair account
Okay.
has a increased participant limit.
Great. Okay.
Just as long as it's not the 5th.
Yeah, not the 5th. So, Alex, what about you guys on your side?
in terms of the next committee meeting,
No, in terms of the community engagement, so we can lock that date in.
I had June 7th on my calendar. John, I think you put that there.
Yep, I'm fine with that. So June 7th for the next community engagement. So we'll lock that date in. Our next meeting with MAPC will be on May 9th. And then you'll send out your draft materials in advance of the meeting so the committee can review them and then provide you feedback.
Yes.
Okay.
And so it's up to you if you feel it's necessary to meet and discuss that, or maybe you could do it where the committee members send their thoughts to you, Michelle, and then you send that to us.
Yeah, so I know you said 2 weeks, so I don't think the next time we're gonna meet as a committee is until, it's up to you guys, but Mark's not here. If you had something to us week of the 24th, the draft materials, and we can talk as a committee internally. Or
April 24th.
Yeah,
Yeah, well, if you're gonna do June 7th for the community meeting, you're gonna wanna start advertising it, May 10th. Right? You can
Yeah, no,
get
we're
your
just talking about the goals.
Yeah, we'll get the promotional materials to you very soon. That's not a problem at all. But but to get the recommendations to you, I would ask that you give us till May 1st for that.
Okay, so then our next meeting is the 9th. We as a committee could probably meet on the 4th. Before we meet on the 9th, if we wanted to talk about. Yeah, makes sense. And what I'll do is I'll lay this out in an email and explain everything. I'm just writing this stuff down now. So I will put a soft hold on the 4th, the committee, and then we'll follow up with the 9th with the MAPC.
Is the 9th set in stone? Can we move it to the 11th?
We can move it to the 11th. So, okay, so that works. So the 4th and the 11th, and then the engagement on the 7th. Excellent.
So the next committee meeting on the 11th, not the 9th.
Yes,
Yes.
the next one will be on the 11th with MAPC.
Got it. All right, I think that works for us.
Yeah, that's good on my end.
Okay. Great.
Same. Thanks.
Excellent. All right. Anything else that we need to cover tonight? I don't have any new business or old business. I think we covered all of the next steps for meetings.
I think we got it all covered, Michelle.
Okay, excellent. So then the chair asks for a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Second.
Okay, roll call vote. Patty,
Aye.
Patrick,
Aye.
Michael,
Aye.
and the chair is aye. We're concluding the meeting at 9:44 p.m. Thank you.
Thank you.
And get some sleep, Alex.
All right,
Bye.
I'll try. Bye-bye.